In the past few weeks, there have been a number of times where there have been significant horrible tragedies that have happened connected with police and violence and things like that. And if you are a human person, whatever your color, I think you grieve that. And it hurts to see that happen. Everybody in those kind of moments has some kind of reaction, and so there's much brokenness and much pain. Charlotte, there have been a lot of protests that have turned into riots and difficult things. And I've seen on Facebook, I have a lot of Facebook friends, people that are scattered around the country, and I see people saying on one side of the issue, blaming this group of people, and on one side of the issue, blaming this group, the other side of the issue, blaming this group of people. And I'm not here today to get into the middle of that, although I may address it at some point in the future with more detail. But here's what I am here to say for today, and that is, I think we all can agree that we live in a bad world. I think we can all agree that in this world that we live in, on both sides of the issue, there are problems. And that we live in a world that's divided and hurting and shattered. We live in a world where people do bad things and people that we want to trust break our trust. I saw this week a person just crushed and brokenhearted because a politician that they just loved and admired had broken something that they thought that he shouldn't do. Yeah. Wait, did you not see that coming? Yeah. We live in a world where that happens, and people that you think you can trust. And so somebody wrote a headline on a thing and said, "Politician's gonna politician." Instead of haters gonna hate, politician's gonna politician. That's exactly what's going to happen. It's so true. So we live in a rough world, and there has never been a time ever where we needed good leadership than we do right now. There has never been a time where it was more urgent and more significant that we have people who can step up in influence for right and influence for righteousness than right now. There has never been a time where we needed somebody to lead well and put broken pieces back together and bring warring parties back together and bring people who disagree to the table. There's never been a time where we needed that more than we need it today. There's never been a time where we needed leadership that was bold enough to call out evil and say, that's wrong. Amen. There's never been a time we needed that more today than today. And so Paul writes a letter in the middle of a bad world. And he writes a letter to Crete to a man named Titus who he has left behind. Paul is a changed man. He's a church planter, a missionary who has been planting churches and traveling across the world. And he left Titus, a man that has served with him, who's been faithful. He left him behind on the island of Crete, which has about 100 cities on it, hundreds of villages and towns and cities. And Paul said, Titus, I'm leaving you there in Crete for a very specific reason. I want you to lead in a bad world. And as we go through this letter, we're going to find a place where Paul says, he says, one of the Cretans' own prophets said that they are liars and evil brutes and lazy gluttons. They're bad people. It's a bad culture. It's not a good world that Titus is working in. And he says, but there's something that needs to be done. And Titus, you're the man to do it. You got to step up. It's time to lead. And so this book is written to take a man and challenge him and raise him up to be a leader in a bad world. And I think he's going to have some things that you and I need to hear, some things that you and I want if you want to lead well in a bad world, if you want to be a good dad in a world that's not full of good dads, you need good leadership. You need to be a good leader in a bad world. If you want to have a church that is dynamic in the south side of Oklahoma City or in one of our other sites, if you want to have a church that's dynamic and powerful, you need to be a good leader in a bad world. You're going to have to be. You're going to have to be an influencer. So, if you want a good church that can make good culture, you're going to need good men to lead it. Now, I'm not leaving the ladies out of this series, but I'm focusing in on men because, let's be honest, a lot of men today aren't men. Okay? Can we be honest about that? Can we just acknowledge that to be true for a minute? A lot of men today aren't rising up and leading and saying, this is the way we're going. Come on, let's go. This is right. We're going to do that. Come on, men, let's go. A lot of men aren't doing that. They're not stepping up in their homes. They're not stepping up at work. They're not stepping up in their schools and in the workplace. It's not happening. So I'm focusing in on men. If you want a good church that can make good culture, you're going to need good men to lead it. So let me ask this question, just kind of starting out today. How do you become a pastor? How do you become a pastor? Well, I get this question all the time, okay? Let me just get personal just for a minute here. I get this particular question on a regular basis, and I ask, did I skip one too many, guys? Okay, can you jump back for me? Sorry, there we go. How do you become a pastor? Those are your blanks. They're there, so if you want to jot them in. I get this question all the time. People say, so how did you become a pastor? Well, there's a little bit of a misunderstanding here, and I'm going to give it to you. This is not on your handout, but I'm going to give you just a quick primer, a quick intro to Christian leadership in the New Testament. Okay, this is not on your handout. You may want to jot this in the side. But did you know there are only 3 leadership roles in the New Testament church? There's only 3. There's a lot of disagreement today in the church world, broadly speaking, on how's the church supposed to be led. What does it mean to be part of the church and a leader in the church? But in the New Testament church, there are only 3 leadership positions in the New Testament church. The first one is apostle, and that is a kind of a church planter, doctrine teacher, large-scale church governance. He's over a number of churches like Paul. Apostle. The next one is elder, and that's the word, it's actually the most common word for what we call pastor. So the word pastor in the New Testament is actually only used 2 times for what I do. It's one of the least common words in the New Testament for pastor. I know you call me Pastor Darrell. Technically, if you were going to use the New Testament term, the most common one, you'd say Elder Darrell. But that might seem a little strange after calling somebody pastor for a long time. So no problem. We know what we mean. But the most common word is elder. And the elder is a person who is a local church leader, a teacher. They're watching over doctrine. They're teaching ethics. They're ministering and healing and counseling and rebuking when it's needed. Elder doesn't mean they're old. It means they are spiritually mature. And it means that they're called to be people who are mature spiritually, who are leaders spiritually. Usually we call them pastors. And I'll tell you this, that in every single church, I discovered this a few years ago, and since then, I have made it an ongoing goal that I've got to make some changes in our church, okay? I didn't realize this until a few years ago, but did you know that there's not one church in the New Testament that only had one pastor? Not one. Every single time when you find them talking to elders, they say the elders, plural, the elders at this church, and the elders of that church, and to the elders in this church, and we appointed elders in that church, and in this city we appointed elders every single time. And I did not realize that until just in the last few years. Elders, every single one of them. No wonder I'm tired. That's what I said. That's why I feel like I'm the only one of my species, because I am. And God said, I'm going to make multiple elders. And so here's what I'm doing. In this series, I'm just being honest with you. I am here to call some of you men to leadership, to a higher level of leadership. Now, we have a church board, and I'm grateful for their help and for their leadership and their counsel, and we get together and we discuss issues, and they hold me accountable, and that way I'm not the only guy managing things and deciding where money goes and that sort of thing. They hold me accountable, so I'm not the only guy. I appreciate their leadership. But a church set of elders is more than just a committee that meets once in a while. These are ministering men who serve and lead God's people and who shepherd God's people together. And I've been wrong. I've been wrong because I haven't worked hard at developing that office in our church. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry on several levels. One, I'm sorry because it's not a biblical thing. I'm not, when I say, I'm the Messiah Savior, the one who can dash off and be super pastor, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. And when I say, I'm the only one who can do this, I'm wrong. And when I'm the only one who can teach anybody anything, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. It's not right. In fact, in the book of Exodus chapter 18, this is still not on your handout yet, but in the book of Exodus chapter 18, Moses was wearing himself out serving and ministering to these people. He'd be there from dawn until dusk, settling arguments and trying to teach people the way of God and all these things. And his father-in-law Jethro came to him visiting and watched him. And watched him get up in the morning, and he'd sit there all day and judge the people and teach the people and show the people the way of God and settle arguments. And he'd go to bed just exhausted, and then he'd get up the next morning, and he'd sit there, and he'd judge the people. And Jethro finally said to him, he said, what you are doing is not good. That's exactly what he said. What you are doing is not good. He said, you're wearing out yourself and the people. They're sitting here waiting on you. And waiting on you all day because you got this long line of people and length things you're trying to deal with. And he said, you're not doing well. He said, what you need is to go out and appoint others as leaders over larger groups and medium-sized groups and small groups. Appoint them as leaders and let them settle things and let them take care of some of the ministry. And Moses did, and it probably saved his life. And it definitely saved his sanity. And I'm here to tell you, I've been wrong. I haven't focused on developing leaders. And some of you guys, some of you men, are wonderful, godly men who love the Lord, and you're moving toward Jesus, and I'm proud of you. I'm glad you're part of our church, and I just want to tell you I'm sorry because I haven't developed you as I ought to. So, since we've got that out of the way, let's talk about how do you become an elder? How does a person rise to leadership? What is the way that you step up into leadership in the church world? Well, it's a mystical process by which you have to get on the good side of the pastor, and I'm just joking. It's not that at all. Okay. It's a mysterious process and long and hard where you have to go away to Bible college and you have to study for 5 years, uproot your family and move away to Bible college and then, no, I'm just joking. That's not right. How do you become a pastor? Titus chapter 1 verse 5. Let's read these verses together. The reason I left you in Crete is that you might straighten out what was left unfinished and appoint elders, plural, there it is, in every town as I directed you. An elder must be blameless, the husband of but one wife, a man whose children believe and are not open to the charge of being wild and disobedient. Since an overseer is entrusted with God's work, he must be blameless, not overbearing, not quick-tempered, not given to drunkenness, not violent, not pursuing dishonest gain. Rather, he must be hospitable, one who loves what is good, one who is self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. He must hold firmly to the trustworthy message as it has been taught, so that he can encourage others by sound doctrine and refute those who oppose it. Titus 1:5 through 9. So what is he saying? He's saying character. How do you become a leader? How do you become a leader, an elder? Character first, showed at home. That's the first thing. Character first, showed at home. Skills next. Skills next. And those are also showed at home in a church. And there's no mention at all of pedigree. In other words, that, well, your grandfather was a pastor and your father was a pastor, and so you must be too. Or you came from the right family, or you had a certain amount of money, or you showed yourself skillful in business, or you have a brilliant mind for finances. No, none of those things. Doesn't mention any of those. There's only a few things that it gives us, and the first one is personal character. Personal character and family requirements. In fact, if you'll go on with me, let's just go right along. For personal character and family requirements. If you're taking notes, this is on your handout. An elder must be blameless. King James Version says, and the New American Standard says. The King James Version and the New American Standard Version say above reproach. We're using NIV this morning, and it says blameless. I kind of want to tweak that translation. I don't like the word blameless. Let me explain why. Because blameless, sometimes people hear that word and it sounds faultless to them. Like, there's nothing wrong with me. There's no imperfection. And people get discouraged. Real men get discouraged because they're like, well, I mean, I see so many faults in my own life, and I guess I don't pray as much as I could, and last week I got kind of angry with my kids, and okay, I guess I'm not perfect. God didn't say you have to be perfect to be a leader. What He said is above reproach. If you want to say the word blameless, it means basically like this: not someone you can justly accuse of evil. It's not someone, it's kind of a general junk drawer kind of term that just kind of includes all sorts of evil. If you are a man who is following Jesus, your goal is to live a life above reproach so that people can't come by and say, or can't speak about you and say, well, that guy does this, and well, he's got this issue. And I know a man who was studied to be a pastor at the same college that I did. He was wanting to be a pastor. He got down to the end of his time studying, and he started kind of exploring different options and kind of making it known that he'd like to be a pastor here or there, or putting out his name a little bit. And the problem was that everywhere this guy went, there were people who had business dealings with him. And everywhere this guy had business dealings, the people didn't have any respect for him anymore. It was that way. It was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that job for you, and I'll side that house right there. I'll put siding on. It'll be great, man. And then it would be like half done, and where's he at? Where'd he go? I thought he was going to finish this job, and it was that kind of situation. Or it was he had sold a car, and he sold that car, and he just forgot to mention several problems with that car, like things that you would kind of want to know about before you paid money for it. In other words, here's what I'm saying. He wasn't above reproach. I had a young man some time back who was talking to me, and I have opportunity to observe his life. And he was in a pastoral position. I'd had opportunity to see his life, and I saw a relationship that he had with a young woman in the church. And I'm not talking about I'm not saying it was inappropriate. I don't know. I don't have any reason to believe that it was. But I saw that relationship, and he had come to me, talking to me about some asking for some counsel on something, and I said, let me just tell you something. This relationship that you have there, that's going to be a problem. And the reason that's going to be a problem, I'm not accusing you of anything or accusing her of anything. What I'm saying is that you don't want that the God doesn't just call you to be living in victory over sin personally. He calls you to be above reproach. And above reproach does have some necessity of you being able to be respected by other people. It does. That you have to be the kind of person that other people look at you and say, I know who that guy is, and I know I could trust him with my kids. I know I could trust him with my wife. You have to be that kind of person. You can't be a guy who's always... how many of you know somebody who is, okay, I'm just going to put this word out there, slippery? You know what I'm talking about? Like you're never sure if they exactly, like when they say something, it feels like they're dodging. It feels like they're trying to slip out of this and slip out of that. And you're like, did I just get lied to? I don't know. You can't be that kind of guy if you're going to be a leader. That's true. Now, you've had some dealings with some. We've had some conversations about that. Yeah. Absolutely. When you claim the name of Christ, when you say Christian, what you're saying is, I am a follower of the Son of God. I am one who loves and follows Jesus Christ. And so, men, I am calling you to be a man who is blameless or above reproach, so that people cannot look at you and justly accuse you of evil. Will sometimes people accuse you of things falsely? Yes, they will. I've been accused, you've probably been accused of things that you did not do, but your goal is to live in such a way that their accusations are proven to be false by the integrity and the faithfulness of your character. That's your goal. So, family, let's talk about, let me give you one more just note here. I've had some people say to me, Christian guys who are trying to follow the Lord, and they say, well, the Bible doesn't say that anywhere, you can't prove it to me. Well, okay, let me just be honest with you. There are some times where you may be in the right, as the Scripture says, but if people around you are looking at you and saying, I don't know that this is right, you may not be above reproach. Am I making sense? You may be in line with the Bible, because the Bible doesn't say, thou shalt not everything. God didn't cover everything. Sometimes He gave us broad principles and then said, it's up to you to figure out how to put that into practice, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. Right? The Bible doesn't say that you can't take the biggest piece and take the best, but if you love your neighbor as yourself, and you wind up, then let me try that again. If you say, I love my neighbor as myself, but what you're actually doing is putting yourself first in regular situations, okay, the Bible doesn't say you can't have that, or you can't take that parking spot, and you can't do that right there. The Bible doesn't say that, but everybody else looking on is like, he thinks he's something. Then you're not above reproach anymore. Does that make sense? Above reproach is the standard we're going for. I want to live with complete, total integrity. Sometimes as a pastor, sometimes as a person, I am a little scattered, and I sometimes forget details, and I'll say, you know what, I'll take care of that, and then I may forget. But if I do, you come talk to me, okay? And some of you do. Some of you have, and I appreciate that. Because I want to live with complete and total integrity. The word integrity comes from a Latin word integritas. And the word integritas was a salute that would be shouted out when the general of the Roman troops was inspecting his troops. He would walk by or ride by, the king would ride by, and they would be out in their ranks lined up, the soldiers, and as they rode by the line, they would strike their breastplate of armor. They would strike it and say, integritas. And the word means wholeness, completeness. There's no holes. There's no gaps in my armor. My armor is well taken care of. It's polished and shining. There's no holes in my armor. And so integrity is this idea that in your life there aren't holes, there aren't gaping holes of lack of character and dishonesty. That's the idea. I want to be a man of integrity. It also says he must be the husband of one wife. Literally in Greek, it's a one-woman man. That's what it says. He must be a one-woman man. And so this doesn't necessarily mean that he has to be married. Okay, a single man could be an elder. It could be. But if I have a friend who kind of got a name for dating around a little bit. And he liked this girl, and he also liked that girl, and he liked that girl over there, and he kind of liked that girl. And I'm not saying he was inappropriate with any of them. What I'm saying was he wasn't a one-woman man. He wasn't a one-woman man. He wasn't. And everybody knew that. And so consequently, I wouldn't hire him here, okay? He's a good guy. He's a talented guy. I wouldn't hire him here. He's not a one-woman man. He's not a man of faithfulness and character in that kind of way. A one-woman man, all right? Fanatical faithfulness. A while back, I sat on an airplane, and I was flying into Oklahoma City. Usually, if I'm not dead tired, sleepy, I'll strike up a conversation with the person next to me, ask them where they're from, what they do, and so I struck up with this conversation with this lady. She was probably 35. This is about 5 years ago. She was probably 35, and she started talking about who she was, what she did, and where she was from. She was from here in Oklahoma City, and my wife and I, you've probably noticed, don't wear jewelry because of some of the statements in Scripture about decorating yourself and letting your character be your decoration. And so I don't wear a wedding ring. And so it's one of those things that it's not because I'd like to play the field. Okay, it's not because I'd like to play the field, and it's not because I'd like to be free when I'm not at home. And so I was sitting there, and this is one of those situations in which she probably saw. Okay? And suddenly I was like, by the way, I'm really dense about this stuff. I'm really dense. I don't even notice. Like if some woman is like coming after me a little bit, I don't notice. And that's helpful. That's helpful. It's a good thing, all right? But suddenly I was like, her leg is in my space. And she was like, yeah, well, I just trying to find a good guy, and, it's like this kind of thing. And suddenly I was like, wait a minute. I know what's going on here. And I guarantee you, it was like, I don't know how, it was like the next sentence that I spoke was like, yeah, well, my wife and my 2 kids at home, or 3 kids, or whatever it was at the time, 3 or 4 kids at home. Yeah, well, my wife and children. I tell you what, you keep looking, you're going to find, you'll find somebody out there. Shoop, the leg moved back over. The conversation was done, man. It was over right there. You know why? Because I didn't have to have that to have the character on the inside that says, I'm a one-woman man. I'm a one-woman man, and I don't play games with that, y'all. I don't play games with that. Been a couple times in my life where I decided strategically I'm not going to develop that relationship. There's a female there that I like as a friend. She likes me as a friend. But I'm not going to develop the relationship. I can't do it. Just not going to. Not that I don't love them. I hope they go to heaven. I want them to come to church here. Sure, that'd be great. But I'm not going to develop the relationship because I'm a one-woman man. And men, listen to me. I am calling you to this kind of faithfulness. I am calling you to be that man who doesn't have to flirt with the waitress, who doesn't have to go out and do this and do that out there. I'm calling you to that kind of faithfulness, because if you are going to be a good leader in a bad world, a good leader as a dad or as a man at work, as a man in the church, as an elder, you have to be a man of fanatical faithfulness. Husband of one wife. In the Roman world, when Paul wrote this, it was very common for wealthy men to have relationships with servants in their home. It was very common for men to have multiple wives. Caesar and Antony, Mark Antony had 4 wives. Sulla and Pompey had 5 wives. Herod had 9 wives. Cicero's daughter Tullia had 3 husbands. Emperor Nero was the third husband of his wife and the fifth husband of another wife. That's the way it rolled. That's the way they rolled. And so in the middle of that kind of culture, in the middle of that kind of world, Paul says, an elder, if you want to find an elder, a good leader in a bad world, he's got to be a man of fanatical faithfulness, one-woman man. All right, let's keep going, all right? The next one is Christian children. Christian children. It says, whose children believe and are not open to the charge of being wild and disobedient. There are some people, some men that I have known, some pastors that I have known, who by this verse would be disqualified. Now, I do want to say it's not a situation where a grown child has wandered away from the faith. Okay, that's not this. I don't think that's in view here, because then at that point they are making their decisions. They have chosen their path. They have already made. They can choose, and I cannot force them to do. But while children are under my household, and while they're under my roof, and while they're under my authority, my children, your children, you gotta lead that well. You gotta lead that really well. In fact, the truth is, you gotta lead the small church well before you lead the big church. And you know what I'm talking about, right? The small church is at your house. The small church is at your home. And if you can't, if those little ones won't follow you toward Jesus, the church out here can't follow you toward Jesus. You got to be able to lead those little ones toward the Lord. You got to help them be able to follow and love the Lord Jesus. The first responsibility for a Christian minister, a Christian leader, a Christian elder is at your house. Men, please be a pastor to your sons. Be a pastor, be a shepherd to your little ones. Oh, some of you guys, we got so many kids in this church. It's fantastic. I love it. And all of you men, please love those kids and follow them. You pray over them. Pick them up on your lap and pray over them. Do you know what their name means? Pray over their name. Pray their name over them. My sons, I have 4 boys that sleep in the same room, and so I usually wind up being the one who puts them down at night, okay, and then puts them down again, and then puts them down again, and then goes back in and said, I said no talking, okay, right? That usually falls to my responsibility. And so a while back, I was convicted, both by the Lord and by the words of a faithful wife, when she said, and the Lord said, why don't you take your bedtime prayers a little more seriously? They're getting a little older. Why don't you take that a little more seriously? Because usually by that time, I'm exhausted, and they're exhausted. It's like, dear Jesus, please help these boys go to sleep and love Jesus, amen. You know, that's like that. As you're closing the door. That's kind of how it works. And so I decided to pick a different one each night and just work my way through by age and pray their name over them. And so, Darrell, and Lord, I pray that you would make him a man who is strong and mighty like an oak tree. I pray that you would make him live up to his grandfather's name, and that you'd help him to be a man who loves God like his grandpa Darrell does. Okay? So, you know what's happening there? You're pouring in, you're speaking good things over them. And Heath, Lord, I pray that you'd make him, his name is Heath Agan. My grandfather on the other side didn't have any grandsons to carry on his name, and so we gave it to my second son. Pray that you'd help him to have the spirit of his grandfather Agan, who loved people and loved God and was a preacher of the gospel. I pray that you'd help him to be like his grandpa Agan. And Caleb, Lord, make him a mighty warrior who trusts God even to the end of his life and conquers new territory. The territory nobody else can conquer, give it to Caleb and let him conquer it. And by the way, he's going to conquer something in his life. I don't know what it is, but that kid's going to conquer something. We named him strong, and we got it. Yeah. And Gideon, mighty warrior, faith, man of faith from the Old Testament. Yeah. What am I talking about? I'm saying, can you pastor your children? Pastor those children. Be men who lead them, who show them, who speak to them. If you are afraid to speak to your child of God, if you don't speak, if you just are distracted, maybe you're not afraid, you're just distracted, and there's so many other things like the game is on, and I can't speak to my child about God because I got one more thing to do. No, speak to them of God. Lift up His glory in their eyes. Oh, it's so important. I've got to keep moving because this is going to take me an hour and a half to go through if I don't. Here we go. You got to be Pastor Dad. Okay? You got to be Pastor Dad. And when people ask me, now, I know what they mean, and so I'll usually tell them if they ask me if this is my first church I've ever pastored, the only church I've ever pastored. I say yes, but the correct answer is no. I have another church that I pastor, and it's at 1116, just a couple of blocks, just a few feet away from here. It's at 1116 Southwest 57th Street. That's where I pastor on a regular basis. And I'll still be pastoring that church even if I left here. I'd still be pastoring that church. Yeah. Because Pastor Dad is an important role that you have. You got to pastor the little church before you can pastor the big one. Some things an elder cannot be. Verse 7, since an elder is entrusted with God's work, he must be blameless, not overbearing, not quick-tempered, not given to drunkenness, not violent, not pursuing dishonest gain. The word overbearing literally means pleasing himself. An overbearing person is one who wants what they want, and they just please themselves, no matter whether it pleases other people or takes care of them or not, right? It may cost you something, but I think I'll go ahead and do it. Not quick-tempered. Okay, can we just get honest for a minute? Is anybody quick-tempered here? Anybody quick-tempered? All right. Some of you are quick-tempered. I see some husbands and wives like, yes, you are. No, you're not. Okay. If you're quick-tempered, and what that means is I'm quick to flare up and fight back. We're going to need to fix that. If you're going to be a good leader in a bad world, we're going to need to fix that one. Because let me just tell you, if you want to be a leader in the church, there's going to be moments where you're not going to be able to be quick-tempered. You're just not going to be able to. You got to be slow to anger because people are going to say stuff. It always happens. Now, we have a whole lot less of that than other churches. We really do, and I'm grateful for that. I've seen some churches where it's like, and everybody on one side sits on this side, everybody on the other side sits on that side. I've seen some churches. Oh, Lord help us. Not here. But the way we're going to keep it that way is if the leaders of the church are slow to anger. You're not easily offended about everything. Oh, even on Facebook, right? Lord help me. Yeah, it's just not violent. Literally, it says not a striker. You know, the last thing you want in a pastor is a person who gets mad and punches somebody out. All right, that's just the last thing you want. Oh, I have heard stories, but I got to keep going. Some things an elder must be. He must be hospitable, one who loves what is good, who is self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. Hospitable literally means welcoming of strangers. That's what the word means. A person who is approachable and welcoming and is willing to inconvenience themselves for other people. Okay? I'm just being honest with you. If you're going to be a pastor, I promise you're going to have to inconvenience yourself for other people. Right? I promise that's going to have to happen. And you know what? That's okay. That's okay. One who is welcoming of strangers, one who is glad to be able to serve in whatever way. That a hospitable person. One who loves what is good. Let me explain that real quick. I've met some people who felt like holiness or the Christian life was mainly a matter of not doing five certain sins. Okay, like they were like, I don't drink, smoke, chew, or run around with girls that do, and that was like the end of their Christianity right there. Um, that was about as far as it went. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want you to drink, smoke, and chew, all right? But I got hopes that are a little higher for you than that. I really do, okay? That bar is set so low, I think we could all trip over it, okay? My hope for you as a man, as a Christian leader, is something more than just a negative holiness. I don't do this, I don't do this, I don't do this, I don't do this, and so therefore I qualify as a Christian. Actually, what I want to know is not just do you not do certain things, but do you actively seek certain things? A positive goodness. Because negative holiness is important, setting yourself apart from sin. Yes, it is important. But that's not the attractive part of being a Christian. Did you know that? The attractive part, the part of you that makes you an attractive Christian, where people, a Velcro Christian, where people are want to be like you, and they see you and they're like, if I ever become a Christian, I want to be like that guy. If that's not a list of things that you don't do that creates that in you. Did you know that? Why, I don't do that, and I don't watch this, and I don't ever say that, and I don't speak those kind of words, and I don't... is not what makes people be like, I'd like to be like him. But if you are a person who speaks kindly, and the words that come out of your mouth are encouraging, and you are actively seeking to do good in every situation, and you're wanting to influence people and love people and show them good, you are a lover of what is good. That's positive holiness, and that is attractive. People want to be like that kind of person. They want to be around that kind of person. Jesus, the Pharisees had all the negatives. They don't do this, they don't do this, they don't do this, they don't do this. Jesus had the positives, and people loved to be around him. Even people that weren't like him wanted to be around him. Jesus had a winsomeness and a positive holiness that was beautiful. And men, as a man, as a Christian leader, I am calling you to be full of that which is good. I hope you are not always full of negative words. I hope you are not always full. One of the things I'm working on with my kids right now is that right now there's a whole bunch of negative words, and I don't understand it, okay? There's a couple of them that just have this thing, and that it's like everything is negative. You hear the story about the guy that had a neighbor who was just negative all the time, like no matter what. It's just like, beautiful day today, isn't it? Yeah, it's going to be really hot. And it's like, boy, what a great rainstorm. Yeah, it's going to make the mud get up. It just, everything was negative. Finally, he decided, I'm going to impress this woman if it's the last thing I ever do. So he went down to the pet store and he said, I want the most impressive dog who can do the most impressive tricks you've got. Money is no object. And the guy said, come in the back room with me, I'll show you. And he said, this is a special dog. This dog walks on water. So he bought the dog, took it back home, walked out to the pond out back and called his neighbor. And she came out and he said, hey, check this out. Took a stick, threw it out on the water, and it's floating out there. And he said, fetch, to the dog. The dog runs down to the lake, walks on the water, picks up the stick, and brings it back. And the lady said, bet he can't swim. No, okay, don't be that guy. Don't be that guy. With your children, are you consistently negative or are you positive? The Lord has been talking to me through my children's attitudes and saying, Darrell, are you positive with them? Are you praiseful? Do you compliment when they do well? Or do you always find the one thing that they didn't do right? Which one do you do? Which guy are you, Darrell? I'm working on it, y'all. I'm working on it. Self-controlled. I want to wrap up with this verse right here. Well, let me give you the next verse in verse 9. He must hold firmly to the trustworthy message as it has been taught, so that he can encourage others by sound doctrine and refute those who oppose it. In other words, as a elder, as a leader in the church, you must care about the things of God well enough to know them and share them. I've met some guys who could quote to you the win-loss record of the Yankees for the last 2 decades, but cannot quote a Bible verse to save their life. I've met guys who can tell you all about what's going on in this situation and in that area of news, and tell you about celebrities or mixed martial arts and football and what the Patriots are doing and whatever else, but they can't tell you, they can't put together a comprehensive, careful statement about what the gospel is. The good news of Jesus. They couldn't explain it to you in 2 minutes. Can't do it. I've met some guys who know everything there is to know about their work, and that's admirable, by the way. I love that. That's fantastic. But they also couldn't explain theology. They didn't ever read a book about the Lord. They didn't ever read something and say, I want to deepen my knowledge about God. And I say, if you want to be a good leader in a bad world, you better know the God who created this world. And you better know about Him and know who He is and what He's like. And you better understand Him and know Him so that you can love Him with all your heart and soul and your mind and your strength. It's important. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1 is what I want to wrap up with today. Here is a trustworthy saying. If anyone sets his heart on being an overseer, by the way, let me push pause and explain. The word overseer is a synonym, another word for elder or pastor. Elder, pastor, overseer, same word. If you're reading an old translation, it may say bishop, same word. It's the word overseer. And if anyone sets his heart on being an overseer, he desires a noble task. The word here, he sets his heart. The word here indicates a longing. It's used of a desire like for money or a desire for heaven. You want to make money. You want to I got to make some money. You long for that. In the same way, if God has put a longing in your heart to say, I want to lead. I want to show people. I want to influence people. I want to make a difference in this world. I want to be a good leader even in the middle of a bad world and a bad community. I want to be a leader. If that's the case, then God has put that in you, and you are desiring something that is good. I don't have one word of complaint about being a pastor. Yesterday, I was with a whole bunch of about 40 future pastors in Alabama. I was talking with them and mentoring some of them, and we were sharing on a panel discussion about preaching and all kinds of things. And I said before I left, I said, guys, will y'all let me pray for you? And my heart just wells up with hunger for and desire for these men and for their souls. Like, I want these guys to know God and make a difference. Man, we need those guys. We need an army of men who will rise up and make a difference in a bad world, in a world where people get shot, in a world where police and rioters are clashing with each other. We need men who rise up and say, I'm raising a generation of young men coming behind me to be godly, good men. We need men who rise up and say, I'll speak the truth when it's not popular. I will trust God when it is not easy. I will speak His name when it is not popular and not wanted always in this bad world. I'm bold enough to be a leader and be an influence to the people around me. We need men like that. And if God has put a hunger in your heart to be a leader, to be an influencer, I want you to cherish that hunger because it's a good thing. And I don't have one word of complaint about being a leader, about being a pastor, an elder in the church of God. It is a noble thing. There's an old story of one of the presidents of the United States. He had gone into politics and he said, Mother, I've decided to become a lawyer. And his mother said, you poor man, you could have been a preacher. He became a lawyer and he graduated the bar exam and he became successful, and then he ran for state senate in his state, and he won the election. And he called his mother and said, Mom, I've become a state senator. I've been elected. And she said, you poor man, you could have been a preacher. He went on up and he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, and he called his mother and said, Mom, I've been elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. I've got to go to Washington, D.C. And she said, you poor man, you could have been a preacher. And then he said, After he had been there, he ran for governor. He won governor. Then he ran for president of the United States, and he won president of the United States. And he called his mother and said, "Mom, I've just been elected president of the United States." And she said, "You poor man, you could have been a preacher." Here's what I want to tell you. I'm not saying that pastor, elder is more important than other jobs. I'm just telling you, if God calls you, if he puts a desire in your heart to lead people and influence people and serve in your local church, don't stoop down to be the president. Don't lower yourself to be the king of this country or any other place. Don't lower yourself to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company if God called you to be a leader in his kingdom. Because that's the highest and noblest task. If God called you to do it, it's the highest task that anybody can do. It's a privilege to be called into his work. So I want you to bow your heads together with me, and we're going to pray.